Now, really unexpected, the Republicans apparently are turning on their banker friends and their CEO friends. They're upset that the CEOs are now working with a lot of the Democrats on the grand bargain. Now, the Republicans are saying, look, we've been holding down the fort here on protecting your low taxes all this time, whether it's for the high-end earners or whether it's for corporations themselves. Now you go work with the Democrats on the things that they want. We find this unacceptable. So out of nowhere, of all people, Dave Camp, Republican from Michigan, is proposing a bill that would tax financial transactions related to derivatives. Get a load of this. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? I love this bill. Okay, it's proposed by Republicans, and I would sign it in a second. I would vote for it. I would do whatever it takes to make it happen. Look, what it does is it would limit the amount of trades they're making that are risky because they have to pay a small percentage of taxes each time. Once you add it up, it leads to a good incentive for not taking more risk-taking. Plus, it raises a significant amount of money. It's a win-win. Now, in fact, it was originally proposed by Democrats, as you're about to see, or some portions of it were. Let me quote Huffington Post here in explaining the bill. The House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Dave Camp is considering legislation that would significantly increase taxes for the nation's largest banks. That is a sentence I thought I would never see in print. Amazing, and it's true. The draft legislation, they explain, would be vehemently opposed by Wall Street and other major corporations that trade heavily in derivative securities. But they're not done yet. To add insult to injury, they're going full progressive. Quote, Camp's legislation also would permanently establish a homeowner aid plan advocated by former Representative Brad Miller, Democrat of North Carolina. Brad Miller, one of the smartest progressives in the House before he retired. A real fighter, somebody who was standing up for the middle class. They're going to his bill to help homeowners? Republicans? They're saying, hey, instead of protecting the bankers, let's protect the homeowners. This is unprecedented. Why? Because the Republicans are mad that the CEOs, in their view, have sold them out and are now striking a bargain with the Democrats. And why is that happening? Because the CEOs realize, God, the Democrats are giving us so much of what we want. Let's just take it. I know we told these Republicans and we paid these Republicans to be obstinate and to never take a deal and to never raise our taxes a dime. But man, these taxes cuts are so good for corporations because in that last fiscal cliff deal where they raised taxes on some of the rich, they actually lowered them on corporations. And so that sets up an interesting paradigm where it's the rich versus corporations, a fight that almost never happens because a lot of the corporate executives, of course, are the rich. But they're not exactly the same group of people. It's not completely overlapping circles. So listen to Dave Camp, and by the way, Orrin Hatch, also angry at these CEOs, also on board for pushing not necessarily this legislation, but legislation against the bankers and CEOs. Quote, the practical reality is that there's simply not enough money on the individual side of the tax code to achieve the size of tax increases the president is seeking. In endorsing the president's push for higher tax rates, you are also risking some of your own top priorities for tax reform. That's their threat to the corporate CEOs, saying, listen, man, our job is to protect the rich. Now, a lot of you are rich, but you think, I guess, you're going to make more money from the gifts you're getting on the corporate side that you're going to be paying in taxes. But there are other people who are not getting those gifts who are also rich. They also pay us. So we're not liking what we're seeing here. Our job is to protect all the rich, not just the corporate CEOs. How's that for an interesting food fight within the Republican Party? But here comes the most damning part of this. How much the Democratic Party has become the party of corporations and their CEOs. Get a load of this GOP operative quote. Fascinating. In just a few months, their lobbying campaign has resulted in Republicans initiating new revenues on their backs, referring to the CEOs. Maybe the CEOs can kill it by Democrats insisting the taxes aren't high enough. Do you get that? So it's this GOP operative saying, hey, the Democrats and the CEOs agree. We don't agree, but but when we push this new taxes onto the corporate CEOs, the Democrats might kill it by pretending that the taxes aren't high enough, when in reality, they want to protect corporations and make sure their taxes are low. He's right about that. So the Democratic Party, in an unbelievable jujitsu, has actually become the Republican Party, the better representatives of multinational corporations. And the Republicans recognize it, and they're mad about it. And they're saying the trick that the Democrats will use is to pretend that they're protecting the middle class when in fact they'd be screwing them over. All right, now, the final piece of this reporting goes to prove that point, although I don't believe they drew the right conclusion. So let me give you that interaction that happened between Harry Reid, who of course the Senate Majority Leader, Schumer, who's the closest to the banks and to the CEOs within the Democratic Party, senator from New York. They're meeting with those corporate CEOs, and this happens. As one CEO lectured the senators about fiscal responsibility, compromise, and shared sacrifice, an aide to Reid passed the Majority Leader a note saying that the CEO's company had paid an effective tax rate of 0 for the past year, according to a source in the meeting. Now, so far so good. If the Democrats were actually looking out for us, they show that note to the corporate CEOs and go, whoa, now you're going to have to chip in here. You, Mr. Responsibility, didn't pay anything. But here's what happens instead. Quote, Reid showed the note to Schumer, sitting next to him. "Don't do it, Harry," Schumer whispered, trying to head off one of Reid's famously biting rebuttals. First of all, Harry Reid has no famously biting rebuttals. That's never happened in Harry Reid's life, okay? But look at Schumer saying here, Harry, don't do it. These are our bosses. Don't tell them how full of crap they are. Remember, these are the guys we're getting the money for. These are the guys we're serving. So what happens? Does Harry Reid listen to Schumer? Of course! Reid bit his tongue, but the credibility of the corporate titans had been undone. No, it hadn't. They never even heard about it. Reid didn't tell them. They never knew the note existed. Their so-called credibility was perfectly intact. Even though the Democrats knew how full of crap they were, they didn't tell them. Instead, they protected them. So the very last part of that reporting is totally the wrong analysis. But the rest of it gives you a sense of what happened in that room and gives you a sense of how the parties have now switched. And remember, we've been saying all along, the Republicans are the bad cops and the Democrats are the good cops, right? That's how they play this game. But the ultimate goal is to give these corporate CEOs what they want. Now, it's not to say that the Republicans have switched so all of a sudden they're actually against corporations and they'll actually pass this bill. They won't pass that bill at all. Believe me, it's just a bluff and there's no way they're going to actually pass that bill, right? But it does go to show you we're close to a deal, because how does good cop, bad cop work? Bad cop works you over, works you over, works you over, and then the good cop comes in and goes, sorry about my buddy, man. But you know what? If you sign the deal, I think you're going to, I can protect you. And the bad cop breaks a chair, as Dave Camp is doing here, like, oh, damn it, John, don't do that. And he storms out of the room. And then you sign the deal with the good cops. And next thing you know, you just got hosed. And this is the game coming to a conclusion. Fascinating. All right. Now, why won't the Republicans actually do that legislation? U.S. Chamber of Commerce spent $125 million lobbying last year. They also spent $36 million in the elections. That's direct contributions to politicians. Of the $36 million, by the way, $28 million went to Republicans. See, I wonder if the Republicans will cross the Chamber of Commerce. National Association of Realtors spent $41.5 million lobbying, $9.5 million directly on elections. Of that, $6 million went to the Republicans. There's no way they're crossing them. The Business Roundtable spent $4.8 million. JP Morgan Chase, one bank alone, spent $8.8 million. This is all in the last year. And of course, the majority of all of this went to the Republicans. They will not be crossing those CEOs and bankers. They're just throwing a hissy fit as part of this theater. If they actually went to go pass the bill, I would be ecstatic. And as I said, I would vote for it in a second.